My name is Kelsey Young, and my role with the Artemis missions is I am the Artemis Science Flight Operations Lead. What that means is I'm responsible for making sure that science, all of our science objectives, are incorporated into the Artemis missions from a perspective of the flight control team. Do we have science representation on the flight control team? Does that science team have the infrastructure that they need to be successful? How will Artemis astronauts accomplish science objectives? How will they be trained? How will we design traverses around science objectives? So my role as the Artemis Science Flight Operations Lead is really to make sure that science has the right role to play in the operations of these exciting Artemis missions. For Artemis II, my role on the Artemis II mission is I am the lead for the lunar science objectives for the mission. So when the crew are flying by the moon, they'll be taking pictures, of course, out the window at the lunar surface. They'll be making observations, and my role is to lead those lunar science objectives. The JETT5 mission was the highest fidelity Artemis III surface mission simulation to date. It included a science team that worked both before the mission and during the mission to insert science objectives in as high a fidelity way as possible. What that science team did was, before the mission happened, they interrogated the landing site with, of course, their science glasses on. What science questions did they want to answer? Where did they want the crew member to go to address those science objectives? And the EVA, or spacewalk, traverses were built in large part around those science objectives. During the JETT5 test, that same science team supported the EVAs from Mission Control in Houston, so they were able to provide science guidance up to the crew on where to sample, how to best address the science objectives, and how to maximize the return from the JETT5 mission, just like they'll be doing with the Artemis III mission to the lunar South Pole. Mission simulations like JETT5 are so critical to prepare the team for Artemis surface exploration. It's critical to test the hardware, like the geology sampling tools, in these high-fidelity analog environments, but it's also really important to prepare the ground teams, the flight control team, and specifically the science team, for what it's going to be like to actually be conducting these science operations on the lunar surface. For example, how should the science team structure themselves? How do they insert that science guidance, those science recommendations, up into the rest of the mission control team? How do we develop the ground support infrastructure, the tools that we need to work in mission control? These mission simulations are really critical to give us these testing opportunities to allow us to figure out how our teams will operate. The San Francisco Volcanic Field is the field site for the JETT5 mission simulation. It's near Flagstaff, Arizona, which is an area that's actually long been used as an analog for preparing for planetary surface exploration. Apollo crews trained not too far away from where the JETT5 mission simulation occurred. And that San Francisco Volcanic Field was chosen in large part because the terrain, mimics the lunar surface in a lot of really critical ways. It has the types of science objectives accessible to mission simulation crews that Apollo and Artemis astronauts have answered and will answer. It's the right scale of exploration. So the science targets, the EVA targets, the spacewalk targets are at the right scale of exploration that Artemis astronauts will experience. So it gives us a really high fidelity and robust way to test our hardware and our infrastructure in a high fidelity environment. And for me as a scientist, it's really exciting because it enables us to ask robust and compelling science questions that our crew members for JETT5 will have to answer and have to rely on the science team real time to help them answer, which makes it a really ideal testing opportunity to start to prepare for the Artemis missions. The JETT5 EVAs, or spacewalks, the traverses that the astronauts were running out in the field, were designed in part around science objectives. They included astronauts visiting sites of interest from a scientific perspective, collecting samples of the rocks and the regolith in the area to answer science questions that the science team was really excited to have the astronauts' perspective on. We conducted some of the JETT5 EVAs during the day and some of them at night, and the reason for that was to test a variety of lighting conditions. One of the exciting things about exploration at the lunar South Pole is that the lighting environment is really dynamic. The sun is going to be moving within the course of one surface mission, and the astronauts will have to be prepared to encounter a variety of different lighting environments. So by testing some during the day and some at night, it enables our teams to prepare for everything that Artemis astronauts might experience. The JETT5 EVAs were conducted with astronauts in the field out in Arizona in our test site, but they were supported by a mission control team back on Earth, so to speak, which in this case meant Houston, Texas, and mission control. So we had a full EVA flight control team supporting the JETT5 EVAs at the traverses as they were conducted. And as a part of that flight control team, we had a full science team in the loop as well. So just like we expect for future Artemis missions, we had a science backroom full of lunar scientists and geologists providing guidance to the crew real time. And we also had a science flight controller embedded in the EVA flight control team as that sort of senior voice for science within the rest of the EVA flight control disciplines. The science evaluation room is the science backroom for Artemis missions, and we actually had that science backroom populated for the JETT5 EVAs as well. What the science backroom or science evaluation room for Artemis is actually the brain trust of lunar scientists and geologists who are responsible for accomplishing our lunar science and lunar surface science and geologic observations and objectives during each Artemis mission. In that room, we have a whole host of the lunar science and geology community represented, and their job is to feed insights and recommendations up to the crew during a mission to make sure that those objectives are represented and accomplished throughout the mission. So it's really kind of where the lunar science magic happens within the flight control team and within mission control back on Earth during an Artemis mission. The science evaluation room or science backroom for an Artemis mission has a lot of different kind of roles and expertise represented within it. You have lunar scientists, you have geologists, you have experts in imagery and imagery analysis, because images are of course a critical data set for the science community after a mission. You have experts in sample science, people who are really wanting to study the samples when they return to Earth. You have software experts and lunar data experts all working together to make sure that the science objectives, the lunar science objectives of that mission are accomplished, and that science expertise can be injected through the flight control team real time. Artemis lunar science objectives will include those accomplished through geology, through geologic sampling. We'll be using geology tools like a rock hammer to get samples in situ to collect for return to Earth. But they'll also include science payloads or science instruments that crew deploy on the lunar surface, but that return data back to the science teams for those instruments on Earth. So the lunar science team, the Artemis mission science teams, will include those representing geology, lunar science, the lunar science payloads, and they'll all be working together to accomplish the lunar science objectives. It takes a lot of work to create a geology and science well-trained crew member, and we do that in a number of different settings. We do it in the classroom, we do it in the field, we do it through mission simulations, and we do it by pulling on science community members from across the number of science disciplines for which we have Artemis science objectives. Definitely takes a science village to create that well-trained crew member, and we're fortunate to have those well-trained crew members as our science team proxies on the lunar surface.